Hello, welcome, parents and maybe some students from the class of 2025. My name is Riley Dunn. I'm one of the two school counselors here at the high school, along with Mrs. Knobel, Nicole Knobel, who's formerly known as Nicole Moore, but she got married this summer, so the kids are calling her Mrs. K now. And we're the two school counselors here at the high school. And we're going to present tonight about the college application process. And at about 6:45, we're going to hand it over to our Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority rep, and he will present about the financial aid process. Before we dive in, I thought you guys would maybe appreciate hearing some of the things that come to mind when I think about the class of 2025. Some things that might be surprising to you. So the class of 2025 is kind of known for being very kind, very thoughtful, very attentive, very hardworking. And here's a piece that might surprise you. They are very, very quiet. And that's probably surprises you because, of course, as we get to know them as individuals and when they're with their friends and everything, they're not quiet. They work really well individually, they work really well in groups, but when it comes to being in the classroom, jumping in and presenting in front of the class is not their thing. So as someone who is not quiet, I think I frighten them a little bit, and I like to give them a hard time about the quiet piece, but I think they know that I'm really just messing with them. They are awesome. Such a nice group of kids. Again, they're super hardworking and very, very attentive. And they've done some incredible things throughout the past few years to really make our school a better place. So we're excited to be now, starting or continuing this process with them. And we would encourage you tonight, don't be like them. Feel free to jump in if you guys have any questions about anything. And yeah, as we go along. Okay, so we did meet with them all in senior seminars this past week, so they have all of this information that we're going to go over tonight. And we also let them know that they don't have to have anything memorized, of course, because there are tons of resources for them, and all the information they need is in the class of 2025 College and Career Google Classroom. So it's got links to all the important websites. It's got, links to scholarships, links for them to easily book an appointment with Mrs. K or myself so that they can get that more individualized attention and planning and all of that. And we really want them to take advantage of that. We want them to pop in. We want them to email us. We want them to ask us all of the questions because that is what we are here for. And that goes for you guys as well. Please do not hesitate to reach out if you have questions about any of this stuff, because you'll see tonight I'm really going to go through the basics of the nuts and bolts. There are many, many things where the answer to the question is, it depends, right? It depends on the student. It depends on the schools that they're applying to. So that can be a lot for students to figure out. So we'll also go over some of the awesome tools that they have at their disposal, but we want them to use us also as a tool throughout this process. One of the big tools we use is the website SCORE, which is huge for college research. There are things in there as well that they will need to do in order for us to be able to send their transcript and letters of recommendation to colleges. So we will talk more about SCORE tonight and show you guys all of the cool things that are available in there. We encourage the kids to make campus visits because it's the best way to really see whether or not the school has everything that you're looking for, be able to figure out what you even are looking for, right? When you get on campus and you're able to say, ooh, I don't like that, or I do really like that. So they learn about themselves through that process, and they can really learn about what they like in a school and really get a sense of where they can picture themselves for the next 4 years. We also are bringing the colleges right to them here at Millis High School. So we have nearly 50 college reps visiting us. And what that means is that it's an admissions rep from a college who's coming and sitting in our conference room during lunch. And we invite students to, always be checking. We post on Instagram. We announce it every morning in the announcements who's here. visiting, and we want the kids to grab their lunches and just go sit with them. The colleges give them kind of a spiel about their school, and it's an opportunity for the kids to ask questions. It's also a really huge opportunity for them to help the college reps put a face to a name, because the person that's sitting in our conference room is often the person who's literally going to be reading the applications for Millis High School students to that college. So if they're able to say, when they sit down to read that application, I remember her. She was so nice. It was so great of her to come and take the time to sit with me when I was at Millis High School. She asked great questions. That goes a very long way in admission. So we really encourage the kids to take advantage of that. Today we had Bryant University was here, Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences was here. Tomorrow I think we have UVM and Hofstra coming. So every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we've got colleges coming. We really want the kids to take advantage of that opportunity. If they enjoyed the college fair experience that we had, bringing them all over to Medway High School in the spring, there are some college fairs coming up too that they could check out. And the college fair at Medway, I know probably the biggest complaint of the kids would have been that they wish there were more schools there. So the nice thing about these upcoming college fairs is that there are many more schools there. So like the one in Waltham has a few hundred colleges attending. So just a nice opportunity to be able to go and learn about a whole bunch of colleges all in one night. And then also for all of the fall, for Flex Block, we are blocking out the other grades, and our Flex Blocks are only open to our seniors. We want them to come and work on their applications, ask their questions. If nothing else, just kind of force themselves to think about it for those 20 minutes, and we're there to help them and support them. So we encourage them to also take advantage of our Flex Blocks. If you're not following us on Instagram, please feel free to do so. We're posting every day about the colleges that are here. We also send out reminders, like things like the parent night, or the last day to sign up for the SAT, things like that. Okay, so for the college list, we recommend 6 to 10 schools. Beyond 10, it can get a little unwieldy. Like I said, there are so many things where the answer to the question is, it depends on the school, right? So that's a lot for students to manage, to track, to keep organized. Some colleges have supplemental essays. So beyond 10, it can really get to be a lot. So we encourage the kids to really do their research on the front end so that they can narrow down those lists and not waste any time or money applying to schools that they wouldn't actually want to go to. And on average, Millis students apply to 6 or 7 schools total. So, and we want that list to be balanced and realistic. So they should have at least 2 safety schools on their list, 2 target schools, and 2 reach schools. And what that means is a safety school would be a school where if you look up their average mid-range of accepted GPA and SAT scores, for a safety school, your students' GPA and SAT score are above that mid-range, so they can feel pretty good about getting accepted to that school. If they fall right into that mid-50% range of SAT scores and GPA, that's a target school, okay? And then they probably have some schools on their list where they might fall below that mid-range, and we would call that a reach school. And what we say to the kids is, when we say that's a reach school, by no means are we saying you don't have a chance of getting in there. We have kids get into their reach schools all the time. We encourage the kids to apply to as many reach schools as they want to, but we just also want to make sure that they have at least 2 targets and 2 safeties just in case. And every school on that list should be a school that they're really excited to go to. So there's over 4,000 colleges in the United States. They can certainly find 6 to 10 that they feel really excited about attending. And again, it gets expensive with all the application fees, and it's time consuming. So we want to make sure that they're not applying to any schools that they wouldn't actually want to go to. And just to note that colleges are often tracking something called demonstrated interest, which means they're paying attention to whether the kids are opening their emails, they're tracking, if the kids have made a visit to campus, they're tracking whether or not they pop down to say hello during their lunch visit at Millis High School, because they want to admit students who are likely to come to their school. So they are looking for students who they know have done the research and really care about their school. So we just encourage the kids to, if they get an email from a school that they are truly interested in, take a minute to read that email, to open it and read it, and do things like pop down to the admissions office or to the conference room during lunch. Okay, and there are some different deadlines that they will see throughout this process. There are two types of early deadlines. Both of them are generally November 1st or November 15th. Some of the southern schools are even earlier than that. They're October 15th. And early action deadlines are simply acting early. Students can apply to as many schools early action as they want to. It's kind of nice because you get to hear back about whether or not you're accepted, typically in December, sometimes in January. And then they have until May 1st to decide which of those schools they actually want to go to. Early decision, on the other hand, that's the one we say to distinguish it for the kids. Early decision is a big decision. Okay, early decision is when students choose one school that they love the most, and they literally sign a contract that says, "If you admit me to your school, I am coming." So they would have to withdraw any of their other applications that they've sent out at that time and commit and deposit at that school. Most of our kids don't do that because I think many people want to be able to, apply to a bunch of different schools, hear back about whether you're accepted, be able to weigh your financial aid packages and see how much each school would cost, and then make your decision. But we do occasionally have kids who, really, truly, absolutely love a school, and it can help your chances of getting in if you do early decision. So we have a few kids each year do early decision as well. So early decision is a big decision. Early action is just acting early. Okay, and then regular decision. Oh, yeah. Great question. The question was, if it's early action, is it a different application or is it just having it in by the earlier deadline? It's the same application and you just have it in by the earlier deadline. Okay, so regular decision deadlines are typically January 1st, January 15th. There are some in December, and those, kids can apply to as many as they want. Regular decision, they typically hear back by March, the end of March, and then they have until May 1st to decide where they actually want to go. And then some schools have something called rolling admissions, which means that they are kind of accepting applications at any time and they're handing out decisions as they go. So if a school is rolling, often students will hear back just 2 weeks after they applied. And we kind of tell the kids that it's to their benefit to apply within the first half of the year if the school is rolling. So it might say that their hard deadline isn't until June, but they're filling their pool as time goes on. So it's a good idea to aim for kind of early December to get rolling applications in as well. And we do want the kids to, be organized about this, note the deadlines of colleges, which can be found in the college website. It can be found in SCORE. It can be found on their college app, on the Common App as well. So it's all right there for them, but they do just want to make sure that they're paying attention to those deadlines and knowing when everything's due. Okay, and a big topic is definitely SAT and ACT scores. So we encouraged all the kids to, take the SAT, or most of the kids, to take the SATs, do their best on them. But the nice thing is that now over 80% of colleges are test optional, which means that they don't require SAT or ACT scores to be sent in as part of the application, which is great. It's a lot of pressure off. So if those SAT scores and ACT scores didn't end up being a good reflection of who they are as a student, that's fine. Nobody ever needs to know, and they can just keep those scores to themselves and apply without those scores. And what that means is that the college is just going to review the information that they have. Like, a common question from the kids is, but aren't they then just going to assume my scores were bad? And no, like, they're test optional for a reason. They're test optional because they recognize that they don't need that piece of information to be able to admit a really strong class of students. So they're not going to waste their time thinking about, I wonder why they didn't submit those scores. They're just going to pay attention to what they have in front of them. And that's going to be their transcript, right? The grades that they have earned in their high school classes and the strength of their curriculum throughout high school, their letters of recommendation, all of their activities that they've done, their jobs, clubs, sports, community service, and as well as things like their college essay, okay? So they still have tons of information to work with. So it is a nice weight off, but I know it's also tricky for some students to know whether or not, like, are these scores good? I don't know. Should I submit them? And we can help them to figure that out. And we'll also show you how SCORE can give them some guidance on whether or not it's a good idea to submit their scores. Oh yes. The advanced place, so the question is, how are advanced placement scores, like scores on AP exams, submitted to colleges? They can self-report those in their application. That usually does the trick for the colleges. Yep, on the Common App there's a section for reporting your test scores. And we recommend for AP scores to only send them if they got a 3 or higher. And it is the student's responsibility to send SAT scores or ACT scores to the college. And the way that they do that is by literally signing on to the College Board website or the ACT website. And you know you're doing it right if you're paying. Have your credit card ready, because they have to pay for each college that they want to send their scores to. And colleges tend to want those official scores sent. So even if they were to list them in their application, which they don't need to, even if they do that, they need to log onto the websites and officially send their scores. And if they're sending their scores to some schools and not others, and just kind of as a general guideline, in the application, it asks them, do you want to self-report your scores here in the application? To keep things simple, just say no. I don't want to self-report here, because if they are sending their scores, they need to do it through the College Board website anyways. So they can just remove that thought from their head, just check no, and then they've got they know that if they are sending them, they do it through College Board. And there is one more opportunity to take the SAT this year, and that's in November, and that deadline's coming up on October 18th. Okay, and for applications, most colleges accept the Common application, so they literally just go to commonapp.org, and as soon as they are, entering their name and their address, that is their application. So we tell the kids, like, as soon as you are in there, it's capitalizing your first name and your last name, and capitalizing the name of your street and all of those things. I think sometimes they think they're just setting up their account, and they don't realize that that is actually filling out their application. But yeah, so most of the colleges take the Common App, which means they just have to fill out that one application. They then add their colleges to the application. At that point, they can click on each college to see if that college wants a little extra essay from them or any extra questions answered, and then they can submit to each college individually whenever they are ready and they've completed the application. For the essay, I mean, we talk to the kids a lot about essay. Obviously, this is something that's very much on them. But our advice to them really is to pick something. It's 650 words, so it's a page and a half. We encourage them to pick something that they care about, something that they could talk to a friend about all day if they were given the opportunity, right? Something that they actually have something to say about. There's lots of different prompts that they could use, things like, tell us about an experience that changed your worldview, or a person who's had a big effect on you, or a part of your identity that, your application would be incomplete without it. There are prompts, and then the last one is write about anything you want. Okay, so they truly can pick anything, and we just encourage them to choose something simple, something meaningful, something that they have something to say about. And if they do that and they're being genuine, that's when, their strengths, their values, their personality kind of naturally shines through, and that's really the whole point of the essay. The rest of the application is for listing your grades and your activities. The essay is for showing, who you are and what you care about and what you value. But we're happy to we love looking at essays and giving feedback, so we encourage the kids to bring those to us. Interviews are really rarely required, but lots of colleges do offer them, and we encourage the kids to take advantage of that opportunity if it's offered. And we're happy to do practice interviews too with kids, and we encourage them to always send in thank you card or email after someone's taken the time to meet with them one-on-one. And quick note about two-year colleges, great news, new news within the past, I think, month or two. Community college is completely free in Massachusetts now for everyone. So that's obviously a nice, inexpensive option. We have lots of kids every year that go to a 2-year college, sometimes just to get their associate's degree because the career they're interested in only requires an associate's degree. But we also have many kids who go to get their, do their 2 years at that nice low price point, and then you can transfer to finish the second 2 years. So we have kids doing that for lots of different reasons, and it's a great option for many kids. And if you get, I forget what the GPA requirement is, but if you do, well enough at Mass Bay, it's an automatic ability to transfer all your credits to one of the Massachusetts state schools, and there are many other schools that accept those credits. So a great option, and that application process is very, very easy. It's just takes 15 minutes to fill out their app, and they will accept you as long as you graduate high school. All right, so it's on the kids to send their applications in. It's on the kids to send their scores in if they are sending them. It is on us to send their transcript. We'll write a letter of recommendation for them. We also send something called the school profile, which is just a bunch of information about Millis High School so they know kind of where they got their education. And then we will send, when the grades come out, we'll send their first quarter grades to any colleges that they've applied to at that point. Then when mid-year grades come out, we send their mid-year grades to any colleges that they've applied to at that point. And at the end of the year, we send their final grades to the college that they are attending. So good reminders to the seniors, and we really stress to them, one of the best things they can do for their application is to make sure those senior year grades are strong, right? Because they're making the case, I'm ready for college, I'm going to do awesome at your school. It's hard to make that case if you're not doing well in your high school classes. That is their best evidence, is their senior year classes are their chance to say, I'm ready for college, look at how awesome I'm doing. And they should keep those grades strong till the end of the year. Okay, and in order to have their transcript sent, the only way that so first they have to waive their FERPA rights, and they'll do that in both their Common App account and their SCORE account. And that's basically just saying they're okay with us sending their private information, like their transcript, to colleges that they list for us. And they're okay with us writing a letter of recommendation for them that they're never going to see. So they waive their rights, and then they complete and submit a records release form, which is this is what it looks like, and there's one in your folder. And this is the only way that we know where they're applying and where we need to send their transcript and their letters of recommendation to. So this is their official way to request the piece that isn't on them and it is on us. We do ask that they give us 2 weeks before their first deadline when they submit this to us, and we want to have a few things done before they hand that in, because we want to take those 2 weeks to write a wonderful, beautiful, glowing letter of recommendation for them that doesn't leave anything out about how awesome they are. So we want them to fill out the activity section in SCORE, just so we don't forget about all the awesome things they accomplished in high school. And then we've got a student questionnaire that's in the Google Classroom. And then your homework would be to complete the parent questionnaire. So your opportunity to brag about your student and make sure that we know all the good things and we've got them at the front of our mind as we're writing those letters of recommendation. So yeah, we ask that they have all those things done when they bring us this records release form. And then we'll take care of the rest. All right, and at this point I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. K, and she will take it from here.
All right. So Mrs. Dunn and I write a letter of recommendation for every single student on our caseload, and in addition to that letter, the student should be asking a teacher. So usually one teacher recommendation is required for the college. We have a lot of students asking, oh, but can I ask more than one? Can I ask 2 or 3? If the school is only requiring one, it means that they're really only going to take the time to read one. So it's much better to pick a teacher that they have the strongest relationship with and focus on that one recommendation letter. There are some schools that do require 2, so they can just go on the website for the school and make sure about how many recommendation letters are required. If the student hasn't done so already, they should, yep, do you have a question? Yep. No, ours would be totally separate as a counselor recommendation. So they'd want to get a teacher recommendation from humanities. If they haven't done so already, they definitely should take the time now to go speak to a teacher in person and ask them if they would be willing to write them a recommendation letter. Mrs. Dunn and I write them as part of our job, but the teachers are really doing it on their personal time because they care about the students. So we just want to make sure that we're being respectful and giving them as much time as possible to write that letter. So we ask about 2 weeks before their first deadline, but obviously if they can give them a little bit more time, that would be really nice. So after they've gotten verbal confirmation from their teacher that they're going to write the recommendation letter, they can go into SCORE and formally request a teacher in there. And we have shown them how to do this in SCORE already, but we're always more than happy to refresh them, and they can come and see us in our office and we can show them how to do it. From there, the teacher will get a link in their email, and then they will be able to upload the recommendation letter for the student and send it out to the colleges. So after they ask the teacher, they are totally done with that process. We will take it and handle it all from there. So the nice thing about this day and age is that tracking applications is pretty easy because everything is online. It is the student's responsibility to go into the Common App, finish the application, and get to that review and submit section and click submit. And you will know that you have submitted the application because you will have had to get your credit card out and pay for the school application. So once they do hit submit, it's really important that they're keeping track of any communication that comes from the school. So they could get emails that are sending out portal information. Those are really important because that's how they're going to log into the school's portal and check the status of their application. And just to note, there sometimes is a little bit of a delay between when we send things from our office and when they actually open and process those things at the college. So don't panic if you do get an email saying they haven't received something. Usually it's automated, and 99% of the time we've sent everything out, but we're also more than happy to have them just come down and we can check to make sure that everything's sent. Yep. Yes. That's a really great question. Yeah, every single school in the Common App has its own submit button. So depending on the application deadline, that's when you would go in, and that's why it's also super important to kind of keep track of those deadlines as you go. Alright, so I'm not going to dive too deep into financial aid because we have a really awesome presentation after this one from an expert, but I will kind of go through just really briefly the two applications. So the first one is the free application for federal student aid, known as the FAFSA, and previously that one had opened a little bit earlier in October, but this year it's going to be opening again in December. So you have a little bit of time until you need to get that complete. That's used by all colleges and universities, so any school that they're applying to will take the FAFSA. And it's free to apply, and this is aid that is calculated by the federal government. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's a good question. What we saw last year is that the decisions were pushed out a little bit. So my assumption is that they're going to wait until they have all of the information until they give you a financial aid package. So the second one would be the CSS profile. This one is a little bit more rare, and it opens a little bit earlier, so it would be available October 1st. And it's used by some private colleges and universities to determine aid in addition to the FAFSA. So the best way to figure out whether the school requires the CSS profile is to either go to the school's website, or College Board has a really great comprehensive list that they're constantly updating that states the schools that do require the CSS profile. Unlike the FAFSA, this one is not free. It does have a fee associated with it, so I believe it's about $25 for the initial application, and then for every other school that you add, it's $16. So in addition to the applications that you're going to fill out to get those grants and federal aid, we have local scholarships available to students, and those are going to open up in the spring. The nice thing about the scholarships is that those are free money, and that doesn't have to be paid back. And we also have a running list in the Google Classroom that has an Excel spreadsheet in it that has more scholarships for the students to look at. So that will have the name of the scholarship, the dates, really any sort of requirements that go with it. So that's a really nice resource, and we definitely encourage the students to take a peek and see if there are any scholarships that they may be interested in applying to. MEFA is also a really great resource. That's the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. They have a lot of really awesome webinars. If you're interested in learning more about the financial aid process and really diving deep into that, they have some really accessible webinars that kind of break things down and make it a little bit easier to understand, and those are all free. So for any student who is planning on playing a D1 or D2 college sport, they do need to register with the NCAA Clearinghouse. So you would just go to that website. It's pretty straightforward, the process there, and then the counseling office will upload a transcript for them. We're more than happy to help with anything if there's any confusion there. Okay, so the decision is in. There are 4 outcomes here. So obviously the best one is that the student is admitted, and that's a really exciting, awesome time for the student. Obviously that's the goal, so we'd love to hear from your students if they get into schools, so we can celebrate with them. If they're denied, they can kind of move on and look towards the schools that they were admitted to. And then if they're deferred, what that means is that if they applied early action, they're getting pushed to the regular decision pool. So that means that the college isn't sure yet if they want to admit them. They'd like to usually see more grades from the school year, and then they're going to make a decision later on and let them know. So like Mrs. Dunn said, it's really important for them to keep their grades up this year because the schools are getting updates on how they're doing. So if they do get in the position where they're deferred from a school, it definitely works in their favor to make sure that they are keeping their grades up. The final outcome would be a wait list. So that just means that the student has applied, the school isn't sure yet if they would like to admit them. They're going to put them on the wait list, see what happens with the students who they do admit, and then if they have room in that class for that year, they're going to go back to the wait list. So the really tricky part about that is that the student is not going to find out whether they are off the wait list until after the May 1st deadline. So there's a deadline where they're going to have to deposit at the school by May 1st. If they are on that wait list, they won't know until after the deadline whether they're taken off. So we always really encourage students to make sure that they are coming up with another plan. Maybe putting that one on the back burner and looking at their other options and getting excited about another school because they may not get off that wait list, and it's important that they have some sort of plan there. And like I said, all of the schools do need to be deposited by May 1st. So other ways to make a decision once you kind of have all of the outcomes in front of you, we highly recommend doing some more visits. You could do some overnight stays at the schools. Mrs. Dunn and I have a lot of contacts from previous Millis High School students who would absolutely love to talk to your seniors about their experiences so far. So if your student is interested in talking to a recent grad, we'd be more than happy to set up a conversation or get them the contact information so they can kind of talk about what their experience has been so far. And obviously financial aid is incredibly important, so having those financial aid packages in front of you and being able to compare everything is really helpful in making that decision as well. Alright, so in closing, there is a college out there for everybody. We really truly believe that students should be looking for the best fit for them and trying to kind of tune out the noise, tune out different opinions, and stick to the school that feels best for them and is in alignment with their goals for the future. We feel that this is a student-led process, so we really want our students to be taking ownership over the process, and obviously parents and counselors are there to help every step of the way, but at the end of the day it's the students who are going to be there for 4 years, so we want to make sure that they're really part of this process as well. So at this point I'm going to do a very brief demo of SCORE, and this is the program that we use with the students to help with the application process. So they all have a SCORE account currently, and we've kind of gone through and guided seminar and shown them how to use some of the tools in here. So this is a dummy account. There's no personal student information in here. But once the student logs in, they're going to get to this page right here where it has them sign that FERPA agreement that Mrs. Dunn talked about earlier. So they would just do get started, scroll down, hit granted, and sign and continue, and that's all they need to do for that FERPA agreement. So again, that's just showing the colleges that they trust what is going into those recommendation letters. It's reassuring them that they know that their teachers are going to be truthful and give them a really good recommendation, and they're not trying to control what's going in there. So that privacy agreement is important. In addition to that, there is also that activity section that we talked about earlier. So if the student goes over to view profile, they can go over to activities and achievements, and they can fill in any work experience, community service, jobs, really anything that they've been involved with at the high school outside of sitting in the classroom would be really awesome to put in there. And Mrs. Dunn and I can access that, so we can use that to make sure that we're writing the strongest recommendation possible. A really nice thing about this is that if they do not have a resume already completed, once they put their activities in there, they can hit this download resume button, and it will make a really nice professional looking resume for them that they can use later on for, other job opportunities. Okay, so in addition to that, one of the really nice tools in here is this Discover page. Yeah, did you have a question? That's a good question. Nothing in SCORE is shown or reported to the colleges. The only use of SCORE outside of building a resume and doing some research is that they need to make sure that this My Colleges tab is accurate. So this is really important. They need to make sure that any school that they are applying to is in this lane. We've shown them how to do this because this is what is going to load on our end so that we can go ahead and send out the application materials. A really nice feature on this as well that is new this year is that when the students are putting in schools that they might be following or interested in, it's going to say whether that school is a target school, a reach school, or a safety school, depending on their statistics in there. So take it with a grain of salt, but we do feel like this is a helpful thing to kind of give them an idea of where they're at. And it's based off of their GPA and their SAT scores that are in SCORE. In addition to that, each school also has a scatogram. So if you go to the college's homepage, there's a lot of data in here. You can look at the most popular majors. So for Fairfield University, business is really popular, health professions are really popular. You can also do, on a lot of the schools, they have like a really awesome campus tour that's super detailed. So if it's a school that's far away, they can log in here and actually go and look virtually at the dorm rooms and the cafeteria and all of that. And then over here in the admissions page is that scattergram. So this is data from Millis High School from, I believe, the past 8 years. So these are actually students who have applied to Fairfield University and sort of the outcome that resulted. So these green little dots here are acceptances, and it's going to give you data. So it's going to show you exactly what that student's GPA and SAT and ACT score are. And if your student has taken the SAT already, they will be plotted on this as well. So as you can see for this student, this would be a good target school because they're kind of right in the middle there where a lot of acceptances are, but not quite high enough for it to be a safety. Right. Let's see. I think that's probably good. Did anyone have questions on score? All right. So as always, Mrs. Dunn and I are really, really excited to work with your seniors, and we definitely are here to help you as well. If you have any questions along the way, please reach out to us, send us an email, or give us a call. We know that this process can be very overwhelming, so we definitely want to make sure that we help you guys in any way we can. So that's our contact information right there. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Justin Munoz, who is the Assistant Director of Financial Aid at Harvard University.
So my name is Justin Munoz. I'm an Assistant Director of Financial Aid with Harvard University. My areas of specialty, I guess, within the office are federal compliance and education loans, but I've been with Harvard since 2012, so I've been there quite a while. Before that, I was more in private advising capacity, also with college financial aid, a bit of admissions, not nearly as experienced in that realm as the guidance counselors here, but I can at least say I've done it. So I've been doing this for a while, and I've been doing these MIFA workshops for a little over 10 years, and I'm kind of, I'm always happy to be back up here. What I like to do is give a little bit about myself, then also kind of get to know who I'm talking with, because I think that helps inform the presentation, the materials here, because I'm going to give you a lot of professional advice. Again, I've been doing this for a while. I'm going to interject with opinions, and I will preface those opinions when they come out so you'll know that they are my thoughts and mine alone. But I am a student who originally from upstate New York. I went to school out there. I am a product of a state school, the SUNY system, SUNY Geneseo, if anybody is familiar or excited about going out there. And I was the student way back when doing these conversations with the guidance counselors, with parents, sitting down at the kitchen table at the end of the night, it was on me to figure out where I was going to go, what I was going to do, and how I was going to pay for it. My parents took a very small loan my freshman year, and that was it. And after that, I was on my own, whether it was work or scholarships or loans or otherwise. So it's been a while, but I still remember it like it was yesterday, and I've done it. You can see I have both arms and both legs, so I consider that a success. I have had student loans. I have paid off my student loans. I advise people on that now. So I do have that side of it. But again, I know things are a lot different now than they were then. So I'm going to go through and talk a lot about financial aid, all about financial aid. I will answer as many questions as I can. You do have a copy of the handout, but I encourage you, as I'm going through, raise your hand and stop me. If I'm going too fast, if I gloss over something you want to know more about, if something is not clear, ask, because this is really for your benefit, and so I want to make sure I am as helpful as possible. And I'll also hang around for a few minutes afterwards if you might have questions that are, say, something you don't want to air out loud in public or you want to ask on the side, so I'm happy to help with that. Now, MIFA is the organization that sponsors these workshops. This is the Mass Education Financing Authority. It is the state nonprofit. And they're a wonderful group. I don't work for MIFA. I am a volunteer. They run these workshops throughout the state on a volunteer basis. And so if you were to go to any any other number of high schools in the area. You'll see financial aid officers from all sorts of other colleges. You'll see occasionally MEFA representatives. But they're a really good resource for this kind of information. It's all free. You know, the best resources, aside from being accurate and knowledgeable, are also free. And MEFA is one of them. So if you haven't heard of them, if you're looking for more information, they're a great place to start. But let's dive right in. What are we going to talk about? So we're going to talk about the types and sources of financial aid. What is it? What form will it take? Where is it going to come from? We'll talk about how to apply, how the decisions are made, what the colleges are doing. We're going to talk about paying for college, which is sort of the end of it. And I'm going to give you a lot of free resources. Again, I won't spend a huge amount of time on that because you have the handout, and I don't want to keep you here any longer than maybe 2 or 3 hours. So I just want to make sure everybody gets home. I promise it won't be that long. You've been here for a while, and I will make this the best use of your time I can. So a lot of information out there. I will say the big caveat going into all of this is that the financial aid landscape, it's always moving, it's always changing from year to year. Things shift, colleges change. Last year was the biggest paradigm shift we've seen in, no joke, about 40 years with the FAFSA Simplification Act. And so if any of you have not heard of that, consider yourselves blessed, because those of us who are living it, it's a bit of a mess, and that might be the nicest thing I can say about it, but they're getting there. So the feds basically overhauled the entire process for applying for financial aid from the Department of Education. They overhauled the FAFSA, they overhauled all the information they ask, the way it works, the way we get data, and they're still working on it. So it is a big change. When you are working with colleges and universities, you know, it's still a big change for us, and so hopefully it's something that will have smoother sailing as we go on. But I would just keep that in mind. Now, I said before, I do like to sort of know a little bit about who I'm talking with. How many of you have a student in college right now? Okay, some of you. So you got to enjoy the new FAFSA, presumably, right? You didn't enjoy it? No? What was it? I was going to say, I enjoyed the old one. I didn't know how much until we got rid of the old one. Then I realized. So those of you with a student in college right now, you've sort of seen that change. Those of you who've never done it before, you don't know any different, and that's probably for the best. But you know, this will be a lot of new things. So again, hopefully I can help clarify some of that. So let's talk about financial aid. What is it? It's money. It is money that is available, that is used for, that is a resource to help families pay for school. Now, there are different types of financial aid, and the largest buckets, if you wanted to bucket them, would be gift aid, which is grants and scholarships. That's free money. That's what we want to see on those financial aid awards. There are student loans, which is considered self-help, if you want to, again, label these. And yes, student loans are considered a form of financial aid. And then there's also federal work-study, which falls also under that header of self-help. Now, I'm going to pause for a minute on the federal work-study because I personally think that's a great program. I was a work-study student. So what this is if your student gets their award letter and they have an allocation on there for work-study, essentially it's a way for them to work on campus, usually sometimes off campus, and have their wages subsidized in part by the federal government. Now, you know, this is clearly a benefit for the employer because instead of them paying $15 an hour, they're paying 10 or 12, whatever the number is, and the feds are coming in for the other rest of that. But it's a really good program for lots of different reasons. A, it's money in their pocket because they can go out, they can earn it, they've got spending money for the weekend. It's a great way to develop different skill sets. When I was a work-study student, not to date myself, but when I was a work-study student, I learned how to use a fax machine. It was very exciting. I don't use that skill much anymore, but I at least know how if I have to. I can drive stick shift too. But yeah, I mean, it was a great way to learn skill sets. I was in residence life. I was in a dorm working under a residence director. It gave me a place to be in a given week for a certain number of hours where I was either working or getting paid to do homework. It was a great place for me to get letters of recommendation when I was applying to graduate school because I had people who knew me from a supervisory standpoint, not necessarily a classroom standpoint, and that's a different take. It's a good take when you're looking at letters of rec. So work-study programs are great if your student can be awarded one, if they can take advantage of it. You know, yes, they're going to have to manage that with the class load and with any other extracurriculars they're doing, but I would definitely encourage it. I think it's a good thing to have. It's a good thing to utilize. So off the soapbox, back to the agenda. Financial aid. We talked about it. Gift aid, grants and scholarships, student loans, work study. Who's giving the money out? The biggest source of financial aid is the federal government. They give it in the form of grants, in the form of work study. There are tax incentives. Anybody who's filed taxes and seen things like education credits, American Opportunity Credit, that's the feds. They're the biggest source. The next biggest source is the colleges and universities themselves. There's a lot of money coming from the schools, and most of it is going to be grants and scholarships. There are occasionally schools you'll see with things like loan programs, but that's generally what the schools are going to award out. The states have money as well. Massachusetts has money. If you do really well on the MCAS and you qualify for the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship, that's state money. That's money coming from OSFA, right up. Oh, they moved. They used to be in Malden, and now I think they're over in Endicott, maybe. I forget. But they're up North Shore. So the state has funds, and what's nice is there's no supplemental applications for that. You do a FAFSA, and we'll talk about it, but you do a FAFSA and you are automatically in the pool for state money. And then there are other agencies. There's sort of the broad bucket of other, and this is your private donors, private scholarships. Think scholarships.com, fastweb.com. Your guidance office, your guidance counselors will know about different scholarships your students could apply for. Maybe there's some hyper-local ones that have applications. That's largely in that other bucket, and it's a source, but it is not nearly the biggest source. The biggest sources of financial aid are the government, the state, and the colleges and universities. So when you're applying for financial aid, that is probably the best place to focus your efforts, your time, and your energy. Now, what forms are these financial aid programs and dollars going to take? Well, if it's grants and scholarships, it's going to be one of two things. And merit-based aid is sort of half the equation. Now, merit-based aid is financial aid that your students are getting based on some definition of merit. This could be a really high SAT score. It could be a good class rank, a high GPA. It could be, are they really good on the football field? Are they an amazing cello player? Are they an amazing debater? There's lots of different ways to define merit, but that's essentially what your student is going to qualify for this money on, is whatever the school is looking for, whatever sort of achievement your student has made. It may or may not be renewable. There are some financial aid programs out there that you might get in the student's first year and not second, third, or fourth. So you'll want to know that going into that first year so you can plan ahead. There are schools that don't give merit-based aid. There are schools that don't give merit-based financial aid. And it's not because we don't want to, but it's really hard to differentiate when you have a class that is full of 1600s or valedictorians or whatever else there is. And it's, not just the Ivies, but there are plenty of other schools out there that are in the same boat. They have a very competitive incoming student body, so merit-based aid isn't something that they can or do engage in. They're the next slide. All right. Merit-based aid applications can vary. Some of them are at the same time you're doing things like the FAFSA. Some of them are when you send in your application for admissions. You want to find out, so you should call the financial aid office and ask. One of the things I want to drive home tonight, if you take any bits of advice away from this, is that you should never be afraid to call a financial aid office and ask questions. And that's what we're there for. That's what we're paid to do, is answer those questions and make sure you are as informed as possible. All right, there's nothing hidden out there. Websites may vary in terms of the information, but again, feel free to just pick up the phone and call. That's incredibly important. I don't want you to be embarrassed or think any question is too silly. I promise you we've heard it all. Now, the other slide, as I mentioned, you've got your merit-based financial aid. The other side of the coin here is need-based financial aid. And this is a little bit more formulaic. This is the school's math, and we'll talk about that, but this is essentially a family. You do your financial aid applications, the college does their math, and they say, does this family need money? Now, need-based financial aid can be grants and scholarships. It can be student loans. Work study is technically considered a need-based financial aid program. Right? And this is the majority of financial aid out there. Most financial aid is considered need-based. Now, schools that don't have merit-based aid tend to be really, I would say, heavy in terms of need-based financial aid. Again, you go on to any, say, Ivy League website or some of the other Ivy Pluses like MIT, Caltech, Northwestern, BC, pick any of those. They're going to have websites that say we meet 100% of need. So that is the drum that they beat. Okay, and so need-based aid is where you're going to be looking for those dollars. That said, there's still a grade component. There's still kind of a merit component to it because your students still need to be making what's called satisfactory academic progress to get this money. They can't just wake up and roll into class and hope that a 1.5 is going to get them the dollars. No, they have to keep at least a limit. All right, so they're not allowed to hit the snooze button. You can tell them I said so. It's fine. I will take the hit for that. But there is a grade component, so they do need to do the homework, go to class, and all of those other good things. But need-based aid is the biggest source of, or the biggest type of, I should say, financial aid out there. But how do we get it? So how do we apply for it? Well, I've said it a couple times, and I will continue to say it. You start with the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is the application that's designed by the Department of Ed. You go in, you fill it out, it goes through to a central processor, it goes out to the colleges, and they determine how much federal aid you are eligible for, if any. Seniors, your 2025 high school seniors, you will be filling out the 25-26 FAFSA. Okay, that's what you're going to be filling out. I point that out because technically the 24-25 FAFSA is still out there and still can be done. But if you do that one on accident and say, oh, the college will catch it, they won't, because it doesn't count. It's not the right academic year. So you want to make sure that if you're a senior, you're doing the correct application. This goes for the any application. You want to do the 25-26. All right? Now, some big changes here. Unfortunately, you are no longer parents. You are now contributors. How does that feel? A little impersonal, I know. When you do the FAFSA, they will present it as if it's all presented to the student, right? The assumption is that it's the student sitting down doing the application, filling everything out, and they will say, who are your contributors? In the parentheses, contributors are usually parents, but that's the terminology you're going to see. This is a little bit different because you can't sit down really and do it all in one go. The student does their section, they put in mom or dad's email address, click send, and then it goes to mom or dad, and then they have to do their section separately. Alright, so it's a little bit, again, opinion here, it's a little bit disjointed, but that's how the process is going to work. And I know some of you have done this, the FAFSAs, the families who have a student in college already, so you've seen this before, you kind of know what's coming. But that is something to keep in mind. That's one of the biggest changes, is that students and contributors are kind of like two different parties doing two different sections. Whoever's the last one to click submit is the official one. Right? If your student clicks submit but you never fill out your part, your FAFSA is not done. Right? And if your FAFSA doesn't get done after 45 days, the feds wipe it clean and you have to start all over again. So you want to try and do it as close together as possible. Yes? Yep, no, that's a good question. Is each parent a separate contributor? And the answer, which is the best answer in financial aid, and it drives people nuts, is it depends. Because it does. So if it is a sort of vanilla, parents are married, file their taxes jointly, both parents should be contributors, but technically only one has to sign or provide consent on that FAFSA, and the other one gets sort of swept with the tide. Now, if you have two parents, and they are, say, married filing separately, now they both need to be contributors, and they both need to sign it. If you have two parents who are not married, but they live in the same household, they both need to sign it, and they both need to do it. So then, we start getting into a little bit of nuance. In theory, there should be help sections that walk you through this, and the FAFSA guidance should get you there. I have seen, anecdotally at least, the biggest problem is too strong a word, but I'm going to use it. The biggest problem we've seen is that latter group, parents who might not be married, but they're still living together, whether it's an official divorce or unofficial, or they were never married, that doesn't matter. Two parents, same household, both are on the FAFSA. The way the FAFSA is worded doesn't make that super clear, so I've seen a little bit of confusion with that this year. But yes, and that's a scenario where you would both need to have contributor information and FSA IDs. Because your FSA ID is kind of like your username and password. This is what you're going to get into the FAFSA with. It's what you're going to sign the FAFSA with. So you need to have one. They're easy to get, they're simple to get. That's your only homework really, is go home, and if you don't have one yet, get an FSA ID. Your students should get one as well, because you want to have that in place before FAFSA opens up. Now, I did see a hand over here. Same question? Okay, all right, 2 for 1. Yes? Depends on the school. Is merit-based aid part of the FAFSA? It depends. Sorry. It depends on the school, because some schools, the merit-based aid, like whether you qualify, might be what are your grades, what are your test scores, but they may still attach that FAFSA as an addition. You might say, well, you have everything here, but you still need to do a FAFSA, right? Because they might want to see whether or not you qualify for any federal aid. They might want to use that for some sort of information purposes or research purposes. So they may attach that to it. You should ask the school, what do I need to do to qualify? Are there any applications I'm missing? To be honest, the FAFSA, it's not as bad, lengthwise, it's not as bad as it used to be. So it really, there's no risk to filing it. I would say everybody on their first year should at least do a FAFSA, because there's no downside to it other than spending a few minutes here and there. But yeah, I would still do it just to see, and then I would follow up with the college and ask, do I need to do this every year? Yep, yeah, and that's the thing too. Colleges are aware of that. Like they know full well. We've known for a long time. No one's happy, but we've known about it being December 1st for a long time. So processes have evolved with that. So the schools know that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be different timing. Maybe next year they'll get it. Yes, way in the back. It's a good question. So if the parents don't live together, if it's something, if it is one of the many households out there where parents are divorced or separated, well, let me back up a step because they keep changing the definition. It's what we would sort of conventionally think of as the custodial household is the household that does the FAFSA. And that used to be more well-defined. It used to be the custodial household was where a student lives 51% of the time. Right? The feds have changed that a little bit, and that's actually, you guys are doing really good segues into these slides. I don't know if you know that. But if parents are divorced or separated, and so there's 2 different households, it's supposed to be the household that provides the most financial support to the student in the prior 12-month period. So that's who's supposed to be the parent of record, if we want to be technical with the terminology. Now, if you sat down and said, well, we each provide the exact same amount of money, we are the same supporters, then the feds have said, okay, now it has to be the person who makes more and has more in the bank. So they sort of are covering all of those different options. But the real short answer to your question is, if parents are divorced or separated, it's supposed to be the household that provides the most resources to the student in the past year. More caveats: if that parent is remarried, stepmom or stepdad is on the FAFSA as well, because it's the household. Okay, so that is something else to keep in mind. Now, what's reported on the FAFSA, again, good questions, keep them coming, is the general information: who are you, where do you live, where are you applying? The parent information, which we've sort of talked about here, and again, there's supposed to be these help dialogues that will get you through figuring out who's there and who's not. It will also report, the FAFSA will want to know how many people are in the household. They will still ask how many students are in college at once, even though it doesn't matter for federal methodology, so they still are asking. Who knows why, but they are. And then financial information. Now, the other big change to the FAFSA simplification is that when you go in and you get to the section about parent finances, and students have the exact same section, is you are told you need to consent to basically to the FAFSA application going out to the IRS, finding your income data, and giving it to the college. Okay, so that is the part. That's sort of, if you want to look at it and say, well, this is easy. The IRS will give them my income information and my wage information. That's one way to frame it. All right? But you have to consent to that happening. All right? If you don't want the IRS to give your data over, if you say, no, I'll do it myself, and you don't consent, you're not eligible for federal aid. If you don't consent, you can't get aid. That is about as straightforward as it gets. All right? And that's a big change to the FAFSA. The other fun part is that when you do provide consent and they do say, thanks, we're going to send your income information over to the schools, you don't get to see what they send. Now you should know what they send because it's on your taxes, but you don't actually get to see it in that browser session. All right, so that's another sort of change here. But you're going to be using your 2023 income when you do this. So there's a 2-year look back when you're doing a 2025-26 FAFSA. The IRS is going to send your 2023 data over to the schools that you've put on that application. Okay, that's the year that they're going to look at. When you are reporting your assets, because this is really broadly speaking about income and assets, your assets are day of. So the day you sit down and it says, what do you have in your checking savings account? That's what you put, that day's information, not 2023 information. Again, a little bit of a disconnect, but this is how the application works, is that income is 2 years prior, assets are day of. Now, talking about FAFSA, talking about assets, there have been some changes in terms of what's included and what's not included. The biggest change is that if anybody happens to have a business or a farm, those values are now included on the FAFSA. They used to be exempt for most people, but now they are included. Net values, I should point that out too. So if there's debt against, that reduces what you report. But your primary home is not reported. Retirement accounts are not reported, so that's still the same. Those are exempt. You don't put those on the FAFSA. And they're going to be very broad in their questions. They're going to say, what are your investments? And we might think, yeah, well, a 401k, that's an investment. An IRA is an investment. My home is an investment. Yes, you're not wrong. But from a FAFSA standpoint, don't put that in there. Because you don't want to be inflating your assets beyond what they actually are, what's actually countable. Yes? Yep. 401ks, IRAs, SEPs or simples, if you happen to be self-employed, tax-deferred annuities, cash value life insurance, those don't count. So those are not part of that. Yes. Yep, it should. I mean, again, it should be. They might not go into each and every type of retirement account out there, but generally speaking, if it's a retirement account, then it shouldn't be counted. Now, it has to be a retirement account from the standpoint of the IRS. Like if you've got cash under the pillow and you're saying that's my retirement, it doesn't count. You got to report that. All right, we might view that as retirement, but not the feds. All right, that's a countable asset. Does that make sense? Pause for any other questions. Yes. They don't. So the question is, do they have access to look at the bank accounts? Right. No, that's a good question, and that's a fair question, right? They're getting all this data from the IRS, and they're expecting you to tell them what's in your bank account and everything, and you know, we want to be honest, and yes, there is the signature that you put on the FAFSA that says if you're lying, you might face jail time, which is, it's real, but how do they know, right? We're really good at this. That's how. If you tell me, hey, I've got nothing in the bank, I'm destitute, it's all zeros, but I'm looking at your tax data and you've got some amount of money in interest earnings or dividend earnings or capital gains, those don't make sense. So what the school's going to do is reach out and say, hey, help me clarify this. Like, help me understand what's going on here. And there may be perfectly logical, reasonable explanations for all of that, but a school is not going to assume. They're going to ask you. Right? That's what is likely to happen in that case. Yes, it does depend on the school and how deeply they delve into this information. You know, we are a kitchen sink school. Like, we're going to ask lots of questions. It's a very involved process. Other colleges may not be, so it does depend a bit on the school. Yes? Yep, that's a good question. So if it is shared ownership of an asset, yes, you would put your percentage of that. All right. Now, what happens if it's a shared property where you have some percentage of ownership, but you can't touch it? You're not supposed to. It's for grandma, it's for grandpa, it's for something else entirely. Like, you technically own it, but you can't get your hands on it even if you wanted to. How do you explain that? Now, those of you that have done a FAFSA before, was there anywhere other than your name and your address to put words? No, there's not. It's basically numbers. Okay, that is a scenario where you would talk to the school, and you would need to clarify that with them, and I will talk about that in a little bit. The other big application that's out there is the CSS Profile. Now the CSS Profile is used by predominantly private colleges and universities. Being that we are in New England, the biggest percentage of them are right here. So it's about 1/3 of all colleges in the country, and most of them are, this side of the Mississippi. So if you're staying in that 2, 3, 4 hour radius from home, odds are you're probably going to have a profile school. It's not free because College Board runs this, and they're going to charge $25 for the first school and $16 for each school after that. So if your students have really long lists of colleges and the guidance counselors have tried to get them to whittle it down and they're still not listening, then let them know that it's going to cost. Right? This can be a pretty expensive endeavor if they've got lots of profile schools. This one does technically become available October 1st, so you can go out and do a profile now if you want to. There's no harm in it. So I would certainly encourage you, if you have profile schools, to do it. Some schools with early action or early decision deadlines will want the profile by November or potentially by December, so you want to keep an eye on that as well. The CSS Profile is also, it's longer. Has anyone done a CSS Profile, I guess? I'm sorry. It's longer though, right? But you get to put more words. There's a whole section for explanations and special circumstances, so at least they recognize that exists. The CSS Profile, aside from being more comprehensive, it's also going to ask about that other parent. So if there is a non-custodial parent or a secondary household, odds are they're going to have to do their own version of the profile. So it can be, again, more comprehensive. It can be more of a requirement. You want to check with the school and see if you have to do it. Okay? Yes? The profile, blessedly, has not changed, so you can do it all in one go. The student is going to start it. Everything is presented to the student. So when the profile says, hey, what is your income? What's your assets? What's your name? It's assuming the student is sitting down at the computer. But yes, you can do it all at once. They don't have the same setup with a contributor and sort of a secondary signature or any of that, no. It would be nice if that was it, but it might not be, because there could potentially be more forms. One of the processes that exist is called verification. It sounds worse than it really is. It's like the tamest audit ever. But verification is essentially what happens if your student's FAFSA gets randomly flagged for secondary follow-up. And what you're really doing is just confirming that everything the school has is correct. They might ask you to submit a tax transcript. They might ask you to submit a form that says, yeah, we actually didn't file taxes, or submit W-2s. But verification is a very real requirement. It is random from the feds. And going forward, it actually is going to be legitimately random the next couple of years because they have to reset their whole machine learning model with the new FAFSA. But if you're selected for verification, you've got to do it if you want that financial aid. If you did your FAFSA, you did your profile, but you're hanging back on their verification worksheets, the school can't award that financial aid. They need this information in there. So you want to be aware of what they're asking you. One of the best pieces of advice that I can give, and I use this myself, was we actually set up a joint email account between parents and myself and use that on all the apps. So when a college said, hey, we need X, as much as you might trust your sons and daughters to check their email and tell you of these things, you can also look yourself. So there is that safety cushion there. And you'd want to use that because, again, this is a spot where you don't want to be missing deadlines, you don't want to be missing applications, you don't want to be second in line when the college starts figuring out who's getting financial aid. So make sure that you're aware of what the school asks for and when they need it by. Because deadlines are super, super important. Most schools, the lion's share of schools, have funding that is contingent on deadlines. All right? They're going to fund students who meet their priority deadline first, and then anyone after that is going to be given aid as it's available. So if you're late, you may not be in a good position for that additional financial aid, that additional scholarship or grant. So you want to meet those deadlines, exceed them if possible. But it's really, really important to keep on track of those however you do it, whether it's a Google Calendar. I don't know if there's resources through guidance, like we give them Post-it notes or something that tells them spreadsheets, Google Docs, whatever it takes, right? Make sure you know what those deadlines are and you're meeting them. And if you don't know what the deadline is, call the school and ask. Ask us. We're more than happy to tell you. I did see a question somewhere. Yes? Yeah, so if we're talking about basically a parent who has international wages or international earnings, they're still supposed to report that, and they're supposed to do it. If you're on the FAFSA, they're supposed to use line items that are as close to the IRS as possible. Same idea with the CSS profile. Whether or not it's verifiable depends on the school. Now, using us as an example, we ask for tax documents no matter where you live. All right, so if you're living abroad in Great Britain, we want a P60. If you're living abroad in Australia, we want that returned. It doesn't matter where. Other schools may or may not do that, so it depends on them. But yes, even if it's international, it still does have to be reported. So, after you apply, the schools will get your information. They should confirm they have your information. They might request verification. They will let you know, and you want to be on top of that. And your financial aid should be sent either with or after your admissions decision. Now, a lot of these schools aren't even going to be looking at financial aid materials until they know if your student is in. So I would certainly expect to get admissions first and financial aid second. Now, how are the decisions made? We know what they want. We know what the schools want. We know the applications they're going to use. How are they actually going to figure out what we're eligible for? Well, this is that math we talked about, the need-based financial aid. Where does it come from? Sort of simple, sort of not. Cost of attendance minus your student aid index equals financial aid eligibility. Now, student aid index is a brand new term. It used to be EFC. That was what everybody knew, everybody loved. They got rid of it. I will agree that technically the word index is probably more accurate for what it's used, but this is your new formula. COA minus SAI equals need, piece by piece. Your cost of attendance is what it costs to go to school for 1 year for one student. Now, we all think of cost of attendance, and we kind of get the basics up front: tuition, room, board, fees, anything that's on the bill, anything the school bills you for, that's considered a direct expense, part of the overall cost of attendance. But that's not it, right? Because they have to get to school. They have to buy the books. They have to get the laundry detergent and whatever other personal expenses they have. So there are indirect expenses that colleges are considering in their cost of attendance. All right? Travel, books, supplies, personal, that's part of it. So schools do recognize, they are required to recognize that there are more expenses beyond just what's on their bill. That's the starting point. Now, I will note that cost of attendance can vary by student. Your cost of attendance at a Harvard or a Boston College or an MIT is going to be different than your cost of attendance at a Princeton or a Caltech, simply by virtue of travel. It's going to cost you more to get there than it is, to get up to Boston. So it will vary by school, it will vary by state, it could potentially vary by student. This is the starting point, though. The SAI, this is where the math comes in, the student aid index. This is the number that the FAFSA is going to spit out when you do your application. They're going to say your SAI is X. Now, it is an index. All right? It is not what you are going to pay for that student for that year. It is more of an index of what you should expect to pay or to be close to. All right? The school will make the final determination how close or far from the SAI you are, but it's a good ballpark. It's a good place to start. All right? The family has the primary responsibility for paying that SAI, whether it's parents, whether it's students. That's a kitchen table decision, but from a school's point of view, the family unit is the primary party that's responsible. In the federal formula, income is assessed heavier than assets. In the CSS profile, which has its own formula, it's not quite the same. And some colleges may have their own institutional formula they use, because some colleges like their own institutional formula that they use. So you may have 3 or 4 going at once, which is why it's important to compare those award letters. So I'll point that out in a little bit. But your student aid index is what's going to be probably the bulk of the determination in how much financial aid you're going to get. So when we award financial aid, when a school finally gets down to it and says, here's how much you get, they're going to start with your cost of attendance, $45,000 in this example. They're going to then fill in your SAI. We're going to assume here for easy math that it's $5,000. All right, so we're like, okay, this is our student aid index. This is pretty much what we're responsible for. We get it. We're ready for it. What else? The financial aid award letter comes out. There's a big grant and scholarship package, over $27,000. That's what we like to see. There are student loans, there are work study. I mentioned that both of these would be in there, and yes, loans and work study are considered financial aid. And we're really good at math, and we say, well, that doesn't equal 45. It's close, but it doesn't equal it. What's the difference? there's unmet need here. There's $5,000 in unmet need. The school said, you need this much money and we can give you most of it, but we can't give you all of it. Resources are stretched for whatever reason. All right, so this $5,000 extra, this unmet need, it doesn't disappear. It's not a coupon or a discount. It goes back to the family, because the family is responsible for any unmet need. So even though your SAI in this example is $5,000, the effective cost is really more like $10 for the year. Okay, that's the biggest takeaway, is that SAI is good to know. It's incredibly important when you're budgeting and forecasting. But how close or far that is from your actual out-of-pocket expenses is really going to depend on the school. One of the best tools that you have at your disposal that schools are required to create is the net price calculator. Every school on their website has a net price calculator where you can go out, put in your income information, your asset information. Some of them will ask about grades and test scores and class ranks, so you can put in some merit information and see what the school will potentially award you. And this is incredibly important to have. It's, again, a great tool to have in your back pocket. It's helpful for budgeting. It's helpful for forecasting. It can also do really good work at dispelling the myth that, hey, that college has a really big price tag, so we can't go. Okay, because that is really, I mean, it's not the greatest comparison, but it's not really much different than if you were car shopping. Right? We see the tag on the window, but everyone knows that that's not what you pay. Right? At least that's not what you should pay. You talk to that salesman. But it's not that much different, because the cost of attendance for a given school is not what a lot of the students actually pay. Right? And I can tell you from personal experience, I was one of those students. I existed in that reality. Yes, I ended up at a state school, but I had a private school sitting right there. It was the University of Rochester, I remember. And I was a good student. I had good grades. I had good SAT scores, and U of R had a higher price tag, but they had more money to offer. They had more financial aid than the state school did. For me, the finance side of things was about the same between the two of them. It really wasn't going to be a huge difference between them. So I was making choices based on campus climate, based on dining hall food, because you know I tried the food when I went on those tours, and you better do it too. Right? But I was making choices based on other factors, not the finances, because it's going to cost me the same amount no matter where I go. Now, if I had looked at U of R's price tag and said, way too high, I can't do that, and never applied, I'd never have that choice in front of me. Okay? They didn't have net price calculators at that point, but now you have that. So you can go out and you can make those decisions, and you can make an informed choice about where to apply, and is this a financial reach? Is it an academic reach? Is it both? Is it neither? This is a good tool to use. So I would encourage you, again, whatever schools that are on the short list, go out and check these net price calculators. So we're getting to I guess this is not the punchline, because it's not that much fun, but paying for school. We know what kind of financial aid is out there. We know how to apply for it. We know how the schools are making their decisions. We know we're going to meet the deadlines. The rubber meets the road here. How do we pay for school? Well, we start with a financial aid award letter, because the school, when they get your application in, when you're accepted, when they go through and they do the review, they're going to send you a letter that says, here's the financial aid we can package you with. Okay? Now, I'm going to assume here that all three schools have the same cost at $45,000. They're all looking at the same SAI. They're not using different formulas, so they're all looking at that $5,000 SAI. And so every school here says this family needs $40,000. Okay? Now, you're going to have College A, which is going to be heavy on the grants and scholarships, $30,000 plus in terms of grants and scholarships. Yes, there's going to be some student loans. Yes, there's going to be some work study. But College A says, you need 40? You got 40. Here it is in your financial aid award letter. And College A is where mom and dad want you to go. You're not going to do it, because College B is there too. College B is a little bit more middle of the road. You've got that same $40,000 need, but they've got some grants and scholarships, some loans, some work study, but they can't do it all. Right? They can give you about $30,000 in financial aid, but there's another $7,000 left over. So your effective cost of there is 5 and 7. You're looking at about $12,000. Okay. College C is where your sons and daughters want to go, because they're not giving as much. They're giving the least. This is just Murphy's Law of college applications. The grants and scholarships are there, but not nearly to the same degree. There's a much higher level of unmet need. So you've got 3 different schools looking at the same bucket of information, but you've got 3 different award letters. And there's lots of different reasons for that. It could be the resources the school has available. It could be the student body that's incoming. It could be you didn't meet a deadline, something like that. It's really important, though, to have all of these in front of you and do as apples to apples a comparison as you possibly can before making those decisions on May 1st. Now, even if we get 3 award letters with the exact same bottom line, it doesn't mean they're the same award. Okay, because you could have 3 schools with a $45,000 cost, a $5,000 SAI, a $40,000 need level. Now, each school here has gapped you to a bit. They've given you $35,000 in financial aid, so there's some unmet need. Right? But they've done it in different ways. Again, College A, please go there. Grants and scholarships of $20,000. This was my earlier example. Right? This is the school that has weighted their financial aid more towards that gift aid. But you're going to have College Bs out there where it's, again, a mix. And you'll note that they've actually thrown a parent loan in there. And that's sort of an interesting nuance. And there's even College Cs, which are not a common thing, I will say that. But a College C award letter is effectively no. That's kind of what they're saying, is you might need financial aid, but we're not going to give you any. Now, my opinion, and shared by plenty of financial aid officers I've spoken with, is that College C's award letter is not a real award letter. Okay, because putting a parent loan on an award letter and trying to package that up or frame that as financial aid, it's not. Right? Yes, parent loans exist. Yes, you can use them to pay for school, but it's not financial aid. Right? It's not part of this whole equation. And schools might argue that they're trying to let you know the resources that are out there. They're trying to disclose information that you may find helpful. Yeah, okay, but it's not financial aid. Okay, College C effectively gave you $5 grand in student loans and they called it a day. Now again, College C is a minority. Those schools are few and far between. Most of them do not do that. But you can see that even if a college gives you the same amount of money, that award is not necessarily the same across the board. Part of why these comparisons are so important, so helpful, and part of also why that net price calculator homework is going to be so good. Now I'll take a hot second to stop and talk a little bit about student loans, because that is a perennial topic, has been for many years. Student loans are a form of financial aid. The federal student loan, commonly called the Stafford loan, is a form of financial aid, and almost every school out there is going to put it on their award letter. Even schools that don't, because you're going to see schools out there that say they're no-loan schools, you can still get and use federal Stafford loans at those colleges. Right? The student loan is not bad if financing is part of the equation. If you have to use loans as part of your financing plan, this is not a bad place to start. Okay, the student loan from the feds has no cosigner, so mom and dad, you're not attached to that. It is the students and their own. There's no credit check, which is good because most high school seniors have no credit. So there's no credit check on that, no cosigner requirements. It's pretty vanilla. It's a fixed rate loan over a 10-year time, and it's a fixed payment. There's not really much to it there. The interest rate is going to change. Every year it's sort of fixed at a new rate. This year's loan is 6.5%. Last year it was 5.5%. Next year we don't know yet, but it is something to consider, that it is a fairly predictable program. Now in terms of amounts, these are not huge amounts relative to some of the price tags you're going to see out there. A first-year student can get up to $5,500, second year is $6,500, third and fourth year is $7,500. So, it's not going to cover a tremendous percentage of those costs in most cases, but it is a way for your student to be involved. It's a way for them to have some skin in the game, to have a responsibility, to have some sort of financial responsibility for those college costs, both during and after school. So if loans are part of the program, if they're part of your financing option, I would encourage you to start here and look at the federal options like the Stafford loan. Again, you're going to see them on your financial aid award letter, so it's best to be familiar with them beforehand. And when we're actually talking maybe more high level about how do we pay for the college bill, I like to keep things fairly simple, and this is not simple to be flippant or to be facetious at all, but it really is 3 options. You're going to pay for school, if you have to pay for school, with either past income, present income, or future income. And that's it. Okay, your past income are things like savings accounts, whether you have an education savings account, a regular savings account. That's money you've already earned and you've set aside. Your present income is something that you might be able to cash flow now. Most schools have payment plans where they'll break whatever's due into 8-month, 10-month, 12-month plans. So if that's something that's feasible, you could do that. And then future income, which is kind of a fluffy way of saying loans, but it's essentially borrowing from your future self. You'll make those payments over some number of years, but that's another way to pay for school. And again, I like to keep these simple. I feel like it's helpful, and this is my own opinion, my own approach to these. But if I sat down with a bill and I said, well, I don't have any savings, I've got two options. And that's really where I focus my time and my energy, because that's what I've got. Now, there are lots of different ways to pay for school, and going into the nuance of who's doing it and how much percentage they have, whether it's parent, student, both. Again, these are all those kitchen table conversations that you want to start having now. Don't wait until March or April to have those conversations. You want to get ahead of that. So it's not a bad place to start. But this is something that you want to consider. And again, the more information you have ahead of time, the more info you have about net price, about award letters, about your SAI, it might not make these easy conversations, but they will certainly be more informed when you're having them. So again, you have a lot of these in your notes. We talked about net price. You heard earlier talking about schools that are best fit, and I think that's incredibly important, whether that fit is academic, financial, or otherwise. But there's lots of different things to discuss. The financial aid office, again, though, is a great resource. We are awesome people. I have no bias in saying that, I promise you. You should never hesitate to call them, to email them, to ask questions, to get clarity, to confirm things. Hey, I got this award letter. What does all this mean? We'll tell you. What do I have to do to keep it? We'll tell you that too. Right? So you should make sure that you are not afraid to be in touch with the schools. And like I said before, it doesn't matter how silly or simple or strange you might think the request is. I can promise you we've seen everything, so we can help you with it. But it's also important too, because as we said before, the FAFSA doesn't have room for context. There's no room on the FAFSA for nuance, right? So how do you convey that to a financial aid office? You call them, you get in touch with them, you explain to them that, hey, y'all are seeing my 2023 taxes, but guess what? That's not what life is. I've changed jobs since then. I lost my job since then. Something happened, so here's what's really going on. You can't do that on the FAFSA. You have to do that with the school. So it's a resource. I would absolutely encourage you to be in touch with us and to use that resource to the fullest extent you possibly can. And in talking about resources, there's lots of them. So again, you have these in your handout. I don't want to go through all of them. FAFSA Day is kind of fun, though. As a financial aid nerd, I'm allowed to say that. But this is where we basically have a bunch of us nerds in the same room, and families come in and they do their FAFSA with us over your shoulder. So you can ask whatever questions you want, and we will help walk you through them. I believe most of them are virtual nowadays, so it's sort of, it's a Zoom room. But it's a great resource, again, because you're getting people who work in the financial aid offices to help you with this information. So I would encourage you to check those out, fafsaday.org. Massachusetts has their own centers, which are great. MIFA, as I said before, is a fantastic resource, so you can use them as well. There's a lot of information on the Massachusetts website where they talk about all sorts of different state programs, not just Mass Grant and John and Abigail Adams, but things like the mass transfer, things like the ways of getting tuition discounts at other schools within New England. So there's lots of information out there. That is, I will say, when it comes to the Massachusetts website, it is primarily for your state-type institutions. For example, using us, we don't do a tremendous amount, the percentage of financial aid that we deal with is not huge from the state, but that's very different for a UMass Amherst, for a Bunker Hill, or a Mass Maritime, right? They're going to be primarily state-funded, so that's a great resource if those are the schools you're looking at. And that's a lot of small print, so I will let you read that because that's too much. But what can you do now? Well, remember your homework. Go get you all FSA ID because you're going to need it if you're doing the FAFSA. All right, check out those net price calculators. Go sign up for some MIFA newsletters if you want. Figure out what those deadlines are and write them on whatever medium you think is best to keep you on track. But this financially it's easy, right? This is easy stuff. But this is it for at least the formal presentation, and MIFA has a lot of information as well. So, any broad group questions at all? Anything I've missed, gone over too fast? Yes, way in the back. That's you. Yes. would check with the school. Some of them may want you to submit it with the FAFSA, because it's entirely possible that the school uses that FAFSA data when they're looking at admissions decisions, so maybe there's some sort of intersection. Other schools might say, let's wait. Like, wait until you're actually in, and then we'll work with you on it. It doesn't take away from that FAFSA deadline, so it's not, you still want to submit the FAFSA before the deadline, so you still have that timestamp on there. All right, so you don't have to worry about that. But they may want to wait, and they may want to say, okay, now that you're admitted, and now that you're one of the student body who is potentially matriculating, let's go into more detail here. Let's learn more about this and figure out what we can do. Okay, because that's, again, just based on volume, like financial aid offices are getting lots of applications. I think, what did we get last year? Something like 30,000 FAFSAs sent our way, which it's a 2,000 person-ish class, right? So we're not looking at all of them. We're waiting until we know who's in. And a lot of schools are doing that because the volume is just so high. So I would do the FAFSA, get the timestamp, get in before that deadline, and then sort of have everything on deck so you know what to say, who to contact, when you're accepted. That make sense? Okay. Yes? Every year. Financial aid is done every year like your taxes, because every year things can change. You might have kids who are in and out of school, costs that change, income changes. So yes, it's done every year. It's reassessed every single year that you want to apply for financial aid at least. The CSS profile is done every year if the school wants it every year. Some schools do. We are one that wants it every year. Some schools don't. University of Miami, Florida, not Ohio. They're a school that collects the CSS profile in the first year and not in subsequent years unless they think something has changed. So it depends on the school. All right, they should tell you up front, but as I said, if you don't know or you're not sure, ask them. Most schools will outline their general financial aid requirements on their website and sort of in those buckets of prospective versus returning student. So you can do a little bit of forecasting and say, what am I going to do next year? Question? Yes, Ms. Dunn? That's a good question. It depends. It really depends on the school and how they run their admissions process. All right, so the school that runs an admissions process that is need blind, it doesn't really matter. Like, you want to get your financial aid in there before whatever the stated deadline is from the office, but having a FAFSA or a CSS profile on file is not going to affect the admissions officer's decision when they're trying to pass your file or not. Okay, schools that are need aware, that may impact that. So you may want to have that financial aid application on file with the early action or with the early decision deadline. Okay? For the most part, there's no reason to wait because the income you're using is done. Right? We're using 2023 income data. That's done. That's been and gone. You're not changing it. Nothing's going to affect that. Yes, assets are day of. I don't think it's a big risk to take. So I would say if you can do your financial aid applications with your admissions applications. Don't wait to hear if you're in, right? Do them at the same time. That sets you up for sort of all scenarios, whether the school wants that while they're reading your admissions file or not. Yeah, the FAFSA doesn't even open until December 1st. Yep, I know. Yep, they are. I mean, a lot of schools, I will say, it's not a perfect correlation. A lot of schools that use early action, early decision probably also want the CSS profile, so they may use that as a proxy. Because again, the data shouldn't be different. But yeah, the FAFSA will be out December 1st, and if you trust the government, it's going to work perfectly. So that's, I know I do. But yeah, that's a good question. I mean, again, we know that. So it's something that schools are definitely, they're working with it. They have to deal with it. All right, well, like I said, I am going to hang out here, so I will turn the mic off, but if anybody has any other questions and wants to come up, feel free.